Yeah, right.
Good job. Okay, so on number 1, it says solve by graphing. And underneath the problem, it actually has a picture that looks something like this, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and it gives you the equation x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals 0. If you are going to solve by graphing, the first thing that you need to do is make sure that the problem is equal to 0. Is it equal to 0? Yes. Then, if you yourself want to put that into the calculator so you can see the picture off the calculator, then this part right here would go into y1. Now, for this particular problem, it already gives me the picture. This is what I would see if I typed it in, right there. Now, when you're solving it by graphing, you try to identify where does it cross the x-axis. So, I want to know this point right there. Anybody know what it is? 5. How'd you get 5? You looked at the picture, and it looked like it was at 5. Right. If you didn't want to do it that way, another way to do it with your calculator is by hitting second trace, option number 2. And for this particular thing, oh, look at there, it's right here. Left bound would be on this side, right bound will be on that side, and then it will ask you to guess. And then you hit enter, and it will come up with, in some cases yesterday, some people had 4.9999998, and some people had 5.000007. That's 5. It just can't put a pixel exactly right on the 5-0. Okay? So just so that you are aware of it. That's number 1. We should have had 2 answers, but we only had 1 because it touches the graph only 1 time. We actually had 5 twice. If we would have factored it, second hour today, they factored it and got x minus 5 twice. That's where the 2 answers would have came in. Number 2 has this looking shape like that. And it has this coming in here and going right back up there. Now again, it's got 2x squared plus 16 equals 12x. If you want to type it into the graphing calculator, it needs to be equal to 0. Is it equal to 0? No. So what I do is I'd subtract 12x to both sides. I end up with 2x squared minus 12x plus 16 equals 0. That's the first thing that I would do. I would get it equal to 0. Then all this is going into y1. It gives you that picture that's on the page already. Okay? Where does it cross the x-axis? Looking at your book on page 120, where does it cross the x-axis? What numbers? 2 and 4. X equals 2 and 4. Some people were trying to give me the y-coordinates, which it does not need those. It just needs the x's because there's only x. Okay, what do you think about number 2? On number 2, this is how you would use the graphing calculator. You type it in, second trace, option number 2, left bound, right bound, above and below. It'll give you this one. Then you hit second trace again, left bound, right bound, enter, and you get the same answers of 2 and 4 just like we did by looking at the picture. Okay? Number 3 has x squared equals negative 2x plus 8. And then it gives you this picture. Like so. Where does it cross there and there? Where does it cross? negative 4, and positive 2. Now, some people have told me that one, Courtney, because you said that out loud. Thank you, by the way. Yeah. Some people have told me that that answer is 1 and negative 2. What did they do wrong? Huh? The numbers on the graph go by 2s, not by 1s. And so they didn't look at the numbers on the graph, did they? Okay? So, again, if you type that in your calculator, you'd see that picture, and it's something similar to this one. Where left bound needs to be below, right bound needs to be above. Guess, nope, tell me the answer, and it would be there. And then Haley's name. Then it would go second trace again, option 0. Left bound above, right bound below. Guess, nope, just tell me the answer. On problems like that, you could do that. You can check them with your calculator like that, see where they cross. That's it. Number 4 asks you to solve this by using square roots or factoring. It's your choice. Which method are you going to use for this one? Why? Because you only have 2 x squared instead of 2x. I have x squared. I don't have a single x in there, so therefore I can square root this one. You can try to factor, but it doesn't come out nice. But you can square root this one because it has x squared in it and not another x. So when I square root problems like this, you try to get the square by itself. So I add 15 first. I get 2x squared equals 15. Then I divide by 2. Now, some of you were telling me that it was still 15 halves, and some of you were telling me that it was 7.5. Which one's correct? Both. How do you get rid of square? Square root. When I'm square rooting, decimals are not usually left in your answer. That's why I left it as 15 halves. Some of you have plus or minus the square root of 7.5, which is not wrong. But if you left it with the square root of 15 halves, plus or minus square root of 15 over the square root of 2, can you have the square root of 2 in the bottom? No. So then you multiply both top and bottom by 2, and you end up with plus or minus the square root of 30 over 2. Those two answers, the square root of 7.5 and the square root of 30 divided by 2, are the same. Okay? That's number 4. Number 5 has 3x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. Now again, it says use either factoring or square roots in order to solve this problem. Can you use square roots for this problem? Why not, Luke? It's got the extra x in there. So therefore, it's not conducive to setting it up that way. So we have to factor. Does anything come out right away? Is there anything I can divide all pieces by before I even start? No. So what times what gives me 3x squared? It's got to be 3x and x, right? What times what gives me 2? Okay, it's got to be 2 and a 1. And so if we put, what do you want, Haley?
-2 plus 1.
-2 and plus 1. Before I go any further, I'm going to check to see if she factored it correctly. How I do that is I check the O and the I part of FOIL. Because I feel like her 3x and x multiply to give me 3x squared, and her 2 and -1, or -2 and +1 tell me -2, that's okay. I just need to make sure it makes the middle. If it doesn't, then we got to try another combo. If I multiply that out, I get 3x minus 2x, which is positive 1x. Is that the middle, Haley? No. It's close though, isn't it? So what really needs to happen is I need to adjust the signs and see if that helps.
Positive.
So if I go positive and minus, that gives me negative 3x plus 2x, which is negative 1x. Now we got it. Okay? When you're factoring, make sure you check that. Just throwing in numbers that multiply together does not necessarily mean you're going to get it right. Now, what do I do once I factor it? You set each group equal to 0 and you solve for x. So on the first one, how would I get x by itself? And then? So if I subtract 2 and divide by 3, I get negative 2/3. On the other side, what would I do? And I would get x equals 1. Again, that's a solve by factoring. Okay? You got to make sure it remultiplies back out to give you the original first, because if it didn't, on that one, Haley, we would have had signs backwards and we would have been wrong. Okay, so just be careful. Number 6. As x plus 3, the quantity squared, equals 8. How do you suggest we go about doing this problem? I would also square root this one because it's already got a squared in it, right? And is the squared by itself? Yes. It's got an x plus 3, but I mean the whole entire thing is squared, so therefore I can just square root both sides to start. That gives me x plus 3 on this side equals plus or minus. What's the square root of 8?
2 square root.
Now, Haley, please enlighten everybody else how you got 2 root 2, because you are correct.
I got 4 times 2, which is equal 8, and then you square root 4 into 2.
Okay. So what she did is she broke it into 4 times 2. And the square root of 4 is 2, so that went on the outside, and this 2 stayed behind, right? Nice job. Now, one other thing that I also wrote up there that almost every single one of you in the room got wrong on your homework you turned into me was plus or minus 2 root 2. Some of you are still forgetting that when you square root both sides, you need to write plus or minus. Because there are problems like that that exist that if you don't do that way, you're going to be wrong with that. Now, how do I solve for x?
You subtract.
Subtract 3. When I minus a 3 away from a square root piece like that, they stay separated as negative 3 plus or minus 2 root 2. I cannot combine those together unless they both have the square root of 2 attached to them, which they don't. So I leave them as 2 separate pieces like that. Okay? That's number 6. Number 7 has 7x minus 6i equals 14 plus yi. And what they want you to do is figure out what x and y is. The x piece is in the real part, so I said that real part equal to that real part. Some people I was hearing this morning were talking about, I need to combine like terms. I'm not combining like terms with this problem. I'm just seeing what x should equal. There's an equal sign for a reason. So what I do is I put the real piece equal to the real piece. So how do I solve for x? Divide by 7. And what's 14 divided by 7? 2. Then I set the I pieces equal to each other. So I have negative 6i equals yi. You're tasked to solve for y. So if I want to get y by itself, I divide both sides by I. And the i's cancel each other out. And what are you left with? Negative 6 equals y. Is it wrong if you were to just tell me 6? Yeah, your signs are off. So be very careful with that. What do you think of that problem? That one's easy? Good. Don't get that one wrong tomorrow. Okay? It's an easy one. Then, number 8. 2 plus 5i plus negative 4 plus 3i. I've seen two people do this morning. Both of them sat in the same spot Sean sits. And what they did, one of them did it right and one of them did it wrong. The one that did it wrong did this. Negative 8 plus 6i minus 20i plus 15i squared. What did they do wrong? They multiplied it. Avery, what is it asking me to do? It's asking you to add it. Right. So be very careful. That is a very common mistake with this problem. It says plus. Do not FOIL this. If it says add, you add. So what's 2 plus negative 4? What's 5i plus 3i? And you're done. Okay, that problem is meant for you just to combine like terms like that. Number 9 has 3 plus 9i minus 1 minus 7i. Is this the same type of problem? Yeah. What's the difference? I'm subtracting instead of adding. So what is 3 minus 1? 2. What's 9i minus negative 7i? 16i. And again, two negatives on that would have made it a positive. That's why we got 16 rather than 2. Okay. If you can do that, I hope you'll have some good, that would be another easy one, right? That was number 9. Number 10 has 2 plus 4i minus 3 minus 5i. What operation am I asking you to do? I'm asking you to multiply it. This is FOIL, not the first two. What's 2 times negative 3? What's 2 times negative 5? 2 times 5? You squared it. What's 4i times negative 3? And what's 4i times negative 5i? Don't forget that that was I squared. What did I square equal to? What, Vanessa? Negative 1. So negative 20 times negative 1. What do two negatives make? Good. So that's really a plus 20. What's negative 6 plus 20? 14. And what's negative 10i minus 12i? That's number 10. Are you guys okay with the i's? Think about what I told you guys. 6 and 7 is simplifying i's. So if you can do that, be some easy ones. Then, number 11. First thing it tells me is find the zeros of the function. When it asks you to find zeros of a function, remember what you do is you take the f of x out and replace it with a... If I'm asking you to find the zeros, you replace it with a 0. Right. Now, my question to you guys is, how do you solve this one? Do you want to A, factor it, B, graph it, C, square root it, or D, complete the square? I want to square root it too. Why? It's just squared. So how would I do that? Subtract 2 first. Good. So I end up with negative 2 equals 9x squared. Divide by 9. Now I would have negative 2/9 equals x squared. Now what would I do? Square root it. Now, here's the catch. Look at what the directions say. Do they say anything about finding the real zeros? Does it say the word real in the problem at all? No, it doesn't. Can you have imaginary zeros or I zeros? Yes, you can. You can have zeros that have I in them. Would this be one of those? Why? Because there's a negative underneath. Good job. So I have plus or minus I. Why did I take the I out? Because there was a negative. And then when I square root each piece, top versus the bottom, what does the square root of 2 reduce? No. Does the square root of 9 reduce? Now the next question for you on 11 was, does this cross the x-axis? Yes or no? Did anybody put it in the calculator and see what it looked like? Because you could have. 9x squared plus 2 graph. Does it cross the x-axis? It does cross? What did you type in for your y equals? Okay. When I typed in 9x squared plus 2, doesn't it look like a parabola that opens up, but it hits at y equals 2? Not the x-axis at all, does it? This thing does not cross the x-axis. You know how I knew that without? And that's why when Devin told me that, I had to look at him and go, are you sure? And what'd you type in? Because it has an I in it. If the answer has an I in it, it does not cross the x-axis. It will never cross the x-axis if it has an I in it. Okay? Number 12. Has x squared minus 6x plus 10. And it says solve by completing the square. You have to do this twice tomorrow. You have to complete the square on 2 problems. So, go through the rules I gave you. Is A 1? Yes. Step 2, move the constant to the other side. So what am I going to have to do? So I got to subtract 10 to both sides. Step 3 said put the b divided by 2 squared. What number is in the b spot? What's negative 6 divided by 2? Negative 3 squared? 9. So you got to add 9 to both sides. Step 4 was to factor, which x minus 3, the quantity squared. Remember what times what gives me 9 but adds it to be negative 6? It was the number that you got before you squared it. And then on the other side, what's negative 10 plus 9? Step 5, square root both sides. X minus 3 on this side. What is the square root of negative 1? Plus or minus 1i or just I is acceptable. If you have a 1 in front of it or just an I, either way it's the same thing. Now to solve for x, how do I get rid of the 3? Add it. And can a 3 mix with an I? No. So therefore you put 3 plus or minus I. And that's my final answer. Again, that is completing the square. You will have to do this at least twice. Now again, on 4 and 5 it says solve by whatever method you want. Could you choose to use this method for those if you wanted to? Sure. But 2 and 3, this is how you have to do it. Then, number 13, same format. X squared plus 12x plus 4 equals 0. And we got to complete the square. So, my first question, is A 1? Yeah. Second step, move the constant. I subtract 4 to both sides and I get negative 4 on the other side. Third step, what number is in your B? Divided by 2?
6.
Squared?
36.
I'm going to add 36 to both sides. Then I factor. What times what gives me x squared? What times what gives me 36 but adds up to be 12? On the right-hand side, what's negative 4 plus 36? Step 5, square root both sides. X plus 6 equals plus or minus. What does the square root of 32 reduce to? 4 the square root of 2. Now, judging by the person that I heard say it, I'm going to assume this is what Haley did, because the way she did it last time. She said 32 was the same as 16 times 2. The square root of 16 over here is 4, so that goes on the outside, and this 2 stayed behind. If you did it the way that I've been showing you with the reduce by doing that t thing, you would add 2 2's that you circled. 2 times 2 is 4, 1 2 left behind. Then subtract 6 to both sides. And I get x equals negative 6 plus or minus 4 root 2. Now, as I'm going through these, are you guys getting these same answers? If you are, that's a good thing for you. Okay, if you're not, then you need to practice tonight. Number 14. 4x, x plus 6 equals negative 40. Now, when I'm completing the square, this is not set up like that. I need to distribute this out first. So 4x squared plus 24x equals negative 40. Is A 1? No. How do I get it to be 1? Divide everything by 4. And I get x equals, or x plus, what's 24 divided by 4? And then what's negative 40 divided by 4? Negative 10. What number is in the B position? What's 6 divided by 2? 3 squared. I add 9 to both sides. Then I factor it. What times what gives me 9 but adds up to be 6? Negative 10 plus 9 is negative 1. Now what? Square root both sides. The square root of something squared is x plus 3. Plus or minus on the other side. Remember that plus or minus, because if you don't, it's wrong. Just saying that again for about the 20th time. But you guys got to remember that, because that will get you some wrong answers. What is the square root of negative 1? I. Now how do I get x by itself? Subtract 3. Have you done this problem pretty recently? Or very similar to it? If you look at that answer as compared to the one that we just did 2 times ago, that one was 3 plus or minus I. This one's negative 3 plus or minus I. It's almost the exact same problem. Number 15 says y equals x squared minus 10x plus 4. And it wants you to write this in vertex form. So when you're doing this in vertex form, again, bring the x's kind of off to one side and push that 4 over, saying I don't want you. So what number is in the B position? What's negative 10 divided by 2? Negative 5 squared? 25. So what I am doing is, as soon as I immediately put in a 25, I'm going to subtract the 25 also. Again, when you insert something into an equation, you have to subtract it out right away, just so that it stays balanced. Then, if you factor these three, you would have x minus 5, the quantity squared. And if you add the back group, what's negative 25 plus 4? And you are now in vertex form. What is the vertex? What number do you get on the x's when you pull it out of the inside the grouping symbol? You get 5. Remember when you pull it out of the grouping symbol, it changes from a negative 5 to a positive 5. And then what's the y-coordinate when you pull it out? It stays the same, so negative 21. So there you wrote it in vertex form, and then you pulled out the vertex. Can you do that? Pretty simple question, I think. I hope. That's an easy one. Okay? Now, 16. A museum cafe with a rectangular patio. A museum wants to add 464 square feet of area to the patio by expanding the existing patio as shown. Find the area of the existing patio. Now, I'm going to look at it as if from the top down, where this says it's 20 and this says it's 30. That's the existing. Okay? How do you find the area of a rectangle? Length times width. So in this particular case, 30 times 20 is how big? 600 feet squared, I believe it's measured in feet, right? Okay. Now, they want to add an extra piece onto each of those things. So this length right here would be 20 plus x, or x plus 20, either way you want to write it. And this bottom, the length would then be 30 plus x, or x plus 30. Okay? For part B, it says write an equation for the new area. Okay? So for that particular thing, if I went x plus 20 times x plus 30, that should equal how much square footage? In the reading, it said we want to add to it 464 feet. So does 464 go there? Or does 600 plus 464 go there? 600 plus 464, which is 1064. Bless you, Haley. Now, part C, now we're going to have to solve it. How do you want to solve this? Do you want to complete the square, factor? What do you want to do? Factor? Now, for factoring form, and a lot of people mess this up, you can't just set each group equal to 1064. It does not work that way. But what you have to do first is you have to distribute out. So that gives me x squared plus 50x plus 600 equals 1064. All I did was I FOILed and I combined like terms. Then if I subtract 1064 to both sides, I end up with x squared plus 50x minus 464 equals 0. Now, Josie, because you were the one who spoke up loud and said you wanted a factor, what two numbers multiply together to give you 464 but add up to be 50? Negative 8 and 58. So x minus 8 and x plus 50? Huh? 58? Equals 0. So what Josie found was she went and found numbers that multiplied together to give me 464, but added up to be 50. Is she right? 58 times negative 8 is negative 464, and when you add them, it gives me negative 50. Nice job. So then from here, if I set each group equal to 0, I would get x equals 8, and x equals negative 58. One of those two answers does not belong. Why in which one? Why did the negative 58 not belong, Josie? Can't have a negative length. So what's the length? 8. Now it says for part C, by what distance should the length be expanded? 8 feet. So part C was 8 feet. Then number 18. The height h in feet of a badminton birdie t seconds after it is hit can be modeled by the function, and it gives you that. That is the same thing as the drum major's baton in the previous assignment. It's almost the same equation, where it gives you h equals negative 16 t squared plus 32 t plus 4. I think in the other one it said plus 6. That was the only difference on 63 on that assignment one. Find the maximum height, and how long is the birdie in the air? When I want to do this to get the maximum height, we got to use completing the square. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to get the t's by themselves, and I'm going to push the 4. Bless you. What number can I take out of both t's? Negative 16. And the reason why I'm doing that is I'm trying to make the a 1. Now that I have that, what number is in the b position? Negative 2. Divided by 2 is negative 1. And negative 1 squared is 1. Now, I'm not adding 1 in the problem. I'm actually adding negative 16 in the problem. How did I get that? I multiplied this out here. So what's the opposite of negative 16? Positive 16. Now, when I factor this, what times what gives me 1 but adds it to be negative 2 is negative 1 squared. And what's 16 plus 4? 20. So, what's the maximum height of the bird? 20. Where did we get the 20 from? It's the y from the vertex form, absolutely. Now, when it says, how long was the birdie in the air? Do you know what a badminton birdie looks like? Do you know the flight pattern of it when you hit it? If you're not in racket sports, which some of you I know are, it comes up and goes back down just like a parabola. So when you hit it, that 0 should be at 0 because you just hit it, right? It wants to know when it hits the x-axis again. If I were to take a badminton birdie right now and hit it right now, it would go over there and hit the ground. That's what I want to know. Where are the zeros? So what I need to do is take my problem and set it equal to 0. How do I solve for x, or t in this case? Anybody know how I solve for t? Subtract 20. Thank you, Courtney, for finally speaking up. Negative 20 equals negative 16 t minus 1 squared. Now what? Divide by negative 16. When I divide by negative 16, it does not come out evenly, but two negatives will make it a positive. And that is, if I reduced it, 5 over 4. And then how do I get rid of something squared, Tina?
Square root it.
Good job. And if I do that right, I should get plus or minus. Now, when you're dealing with the problems like this, when it's a real life situation, you can square out a fraction and you're going to get a decimal. So if I take the square root of 5/4, I get 1.1 equals t minus 1. Now how do I solve for t? How do I solve for t? Add 1. Now, if I were to take 1.1 plus 1, I get 2.1. Or if I take negative 1.1 plus 1, I get negative 0.1. Are you going back in time? No. So how long was it in the air? 2.1 seconds. It reached a height of 20 feet, but it was in the air for a grand total of 2.1 seconds. Okay, so what I just did was we went through everything that's on your quiz assignment that we just went through. I went through the entire thing. If you want to hang on to that for helping you study for tonight, be my guest. Again, note card, calculator, yourself, pencil. That's all you need tomorrow. Okay? Make sure. Make a sheet. Make your quarter sheet. Some of you don't even make them and then expect to know what's going on. And if you're not very strong with it, then you're just shooting yourself in the foot, which is never a good thing.